The acrid sting of tear gas hangs heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the gnawing hunger that fuels the desperation of hundreds of thousands. A refugee camp, home to 300,000 souls fleeing the ravages of war and famine in South Sudan, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Ethiopia, has erupted in protest. The trigger: a brutal 60% reduction in food rations, a direct consequence of the U.S. government's drastic freeze on aid funding, effectively decimating the World Food Programme's (WFP) budget. This isn't merely a reduction in food, it's a sentence to starvation. Imagine, if you will, the chilling reality facing these vulnerable individuals, many of whom have already endured unspeakable horrors to reach this sanctuary, only to find themselves facing a new, equally terrifying threat: the slow, agonizing death of hunger. The WFP's announcement, delivered via text message, landed like a cruel punch to the gut. A mere 40% of the already meager basic minimum ration remains. For Andrew Dafir, a refugee from South Sudan, this translates to a horrifying reality: his monthly cereal allocation plummeting from 4 kg to a paltry 3 kg, while cooking oil and beans, essential staples providing vital sustenance and nutrients, have been completely eliminated. His despair is palpable, his words echoing the silent screams of countless others. "I feel neglected and lost because I have no other way to survive." This isn't just a crisis. It's a catastrophic failure of the international community to uphold its moral obligation to protect the most vulnerable. The U.S. aid freeze, which accounted for over half of the WFP's staggering $9.7 billion, £7.5 billion budget in 2024, has exposed the fragility of a system already stretched thin by years of escalating humanitarian needs. The consequences are devastating, rippling across numerous emergency zones where rations have been progressively slashed, leaving millions teetering on the brink of starvation. The Kenyan government, grappling with the sudden and overwhelming impact of the aid cuts, finds itself struggling to cope with the influx of 800,000 refugees and asylum seekers. Kipchumba Murkomen, the cabinet secretary at Kenya's Interior Ministry, aptly described the situation as having a sudden and severe impact on the nation's capacity to provide even the most basic necessities. The sheer volume of people dependent on dwindling resources underscores the magnitude of this humanitarian disaster. The Social Justice Center Working Group, a prominent Kenyan civil society organization, has issued a damning indictment of the response to this crisis, characterizing the use of tear gas against desperate, starving protesters as the height of state-sponsored cruelty. Their condemnation resonates with a chilling truth. Brutalizing those fleeing war, persecution, and hunger is not only inhumane, it's a profound betrayal of the principles of compassion and global solidarity that should underpin our collective response to such widespread suffering. The images emerging from the camp paint a stark and disturbing picture: emaciated bodies, hollow eyes, and the desperate pleas of parents struggling to feed their children. These are not abstract statistics. They are human beings, stripped of dignity and hope, facing a slow, agonizing death. The tear gas, the protests, the cuts in aid, all are symptoms of a larger, systemic failure to prioritize the basic human right to food and survival. This crisis demands immediate and decisive action. The international community, particularly the United States, must urgently reconsider its approach to humanitarian aid, recognizing that the withdrawal of funding isn't just a budgetary decision. It's a life-or-death matter for millions. The silence is deafening, and the inaction is unconscionable. We cannot stand idly by as human lives are sacrificed on the altar of political expediency. The time for rhetoric is over. The time for action is now. The lives of 300,000 refugees and countless others facing similar circumstances hang precariously in the balance. Their fate rests on our collective conscience and our willingness to act. The question is not whether we can afford to help, but whether we can afford not to.